Well, at least it wasn't Oregon. Okay, so after a start where Rutgers was hanging in there, at least defensively, and didn't get blown out, it wasn't Oregon where they score on their first 5 out of 6 possessions. We lose 42-9 against the number 1 Ohio State at the Shoe. Ohio State covering the spread, which was 32 points. Sometimes you wonder about that stuff, but I'm not throwing bouquets. If you've watched Ohio State throughout the season, they often get off to slower starts. Whether it's Washington, Minnesota, Penn State, even Purdue, I think they were down 3-0 after 1. So that's kind of their modus operandi and how they've started in many games. So although we played well defensively, and there's something to be said for that, where we didn't get run off the field, I guess that's something you can take out of that. But whether momentum is a thing or not, and you can translate that into playing better the next game against Penn State, that's a whole nother story. But you just kind of knew. Well, if we have to try to be perfect to win these type of games, whether it's just against solid to good or elite teams, you walk in that tightrope when you have to be perfect. You just don't have the scheme, execution, play calling, and talent to be able to, or play smart football to be able to overcome those that need to be perfect in order to get a win. Especially the offense, even though the defense played with the offense with doing absolutely nothing. So you kind of sensed how this was going to go. It reminds me of a game against Ohio State a few years ago. I forget which year it was. We wound up losing 52-3, but we were really feisty, in the beginning, and we were playing well and tough and playing hard-nosed defense. But, you can't keep your finger in the dam holding back the floodwaters for too long. So out of our 147 total yards, 92 came in the fourth quarter against Ohio State backup. It's an elite defense. You knew we were going to struggle. I might have heard on the night report with the Ohio State guy that Ohio State on defense has only given up the most points with 16 this year, and that was Illinois. So you knew we were going to struggle. I'll have something to say about Illinois in a second. Eighth end, 10 of 20, 81 yards. When Kenny Fletcher is your leading receiver with 4 catches for 20 yards, you know it's going to be a long day. And like I said, if you needed to play perfect, now coach in the post-game press conference said, he wanted to get into the fourth quarter to have them in position to maybe steal a win. But that would have meant, I know the Bradley Weaver penalty, a lot of people thought was killed any, destroyed any shot we had at this game. But we're just, when you have to pinpoint to one play that changes the outcome of it, wasn't happening. We just weren't moving the ball. We weren't going to be able to take advantage of opportunities. And although that certainly didn't help and kind of deflated us a little bit, in the end, I don't think it would have really mattered. We just didn't and don't execute well enough in these situations, whether it's Iowa, Minnesota, Ohio State, doesn't matter. It's a tightrope that you got to walk, and we are not perfect. And no, it's not NIL and a $25 million team, as I've said. Ohio State has been good for generations, going back to when I was a kid in the 60s. They were good. They're good in the 70s. They're going to be good. They're always going to be good. That tradition, that history, that identity has always been there. That hasn't been our history, our tradition, and our identity throughout the years. So, I talked about this a lot, right before I was born, before Tom was born. They just New Jersey state legislature, New Jersey politics being New Jersey, said, hey, we don't have a state university named after us. Let's dedicate the public liberal arts college as our state university. Voila, you got a state university. So we don't have that history, tradition of winning especially against major universities. Despite that, people like to point out the 60-61 Rutgers football team, which is a couple years after I was born. Nonetheless, some people think that because we hung in the first half, this gives us a shot at Penn State. I don't think that's the case. They're still more talented than we are, and they are playing better. I'm not sure that, after, Terry Smith has got, in the past couple games, has got them playing well, and not having Drew Aller in there, the offense is getting a little more in rhythm. And Penn State goes to Nebraska, and they destroy Nebraska 37-10. Yes, Dylan Raiola was out. But TJ Lateef played well enough. I mean, Nebraska moved the ball a bit. They couldn't convert it on fourth down. They were like 1 for 6. Couldn't get the ball in the end zone. And Katron Allen just ran all over Nebraska for like 180 yards. Surprisingly, he's like the leading rusher in Penn State history now. I mean, he's got, going way back. Blair Thomas and nonetheless, Penn State's defense stopped them when they had to stop them yesterday and kept them out of the end zone. So like Richie from the Night Report said, he would have felt better if, with a Penn State loss as opposed to a win. Now, Penn State has something to play for. Yes, being 6-6 and getting to a bowl game. Just getting to a bowl game is not something Penn State aspires to. That's actually kind of something we aspire to. And, had they lost and they go into this game 4-7 against us, 4-7 instead of 5-6, maybe guys like, I don't want to risk injury. I'm going to declare. I don't want to burn my red shirt, whatever it might be. I want to sit out. Now, guys might have something to play for to get to that game and show off their talents. And when you get to a bowl game, there's money involved. So, that's something to think about as well. And, hopefully this doesn't wind up like against that Maryland game at home a couple years ago when we had that opportunity to get to a bowl game in Maryland. Ran us off the field. Nonetheless, there's no rant, it's Ohio State. It is what it is. And we are not at their level. We're likely never going to be at that level. And as I've said a zillion times, it's not about NIL. Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State have always been good my entire lifetime. Yes, they've had, pockets of times when they didn't win like they're used to. Traditionally and historically, you think about the Michigan team with Brady Hoke. Where was he from? San Diego State, San Jose State, wherever the hell he was from. They went 5-7 with Brady Hoke, and obviously that's not going to last long in Michigan. But these teams have been good for generations. They will continue to be good for generations because they have that strong alumni donor base, because they have an identity academically and athletically, and they have the traditions that we don't. So that's what it comes down to. It's not NIL. It's not revenue sharing, yada, yada, yada. So when we look around the Big Ten, interesting news and notes. Wisconsin and Northwestern actually both do something that Rutgers couldn't. 3-7 Wisconsin at home at Camp Randall Stadium beats Illinois 27-10. Wisconsin brought the heat against Luke Altmaier all night long, and they held Illinois to 50 yards rushing. I watched second half of that game. They come away with a 27-10 win. So a 3-7 team beats a team that's kind of a little bit above average, and a team that's our peer that we should be able to beat and didn't. And in another case of someone doing something we couldn't, Northwestern, yes, Northwestern beats Minnesota 38-35 and are now 6-5. Who had that on that bingo card that they'd like to be in the position that Northwestern is this year? This is what I mean about our team. Forget about the business manager, Kelly's in, all that stuff. Northwestern, let's talk about NIL. Northwestern doesn't have the donor base. They donate to other things, academics and buildings and that kind of stuff. They're rich donors. But the money doesn't go to athletics. And by the way, they're a top 10, 15 U.S. News university academically. So, we're not asking for a lot here. Minnesota and Northwestern are both now 6-5. We don't aspire to mediocrity with our talent in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, a little bit of New York, grabbing some from Maryland and Virginia. We should be an above 500 team. Yes, even in the Big Ten every year. I mean, if you beat the middling teams, you beat Illinois, you beat Minnesota, even Iowa, the Kings are playing ugly ball. They're a beatable good team. You can build some sort of winning tradition. Washington defeats UCLA 48-14, 4 touchdowns combined from Damon Williams. They're now 8-3. USC loses a shot at a playoff. They lost to Oregon 42-27. And both Washington and USC are now 8-3. That's what I think is a legitimate aspiration for us. To be like the Washingtons and the USCs of the world. They're going to come up short in big games like this against elite competition. But if you could be 8-3, 8-4, 9-3, no one's going to kill you for losing Ohio State and Michigan and even Penn State every year. But if you get to 8-4, 9-3, and get to good bowls, that is the next leap forward. We've talked about this a lot, and I've talked about this a lot. It's not culture, it's scheme. USC is predicated on that high-flying passing offense, but they worked in some power running game, and if you could take that style and identity and at least move the ball against elite teams like Oregon, this was a close game. Oregon pulled away late, but that's what elite teams do. But they hung in there. A 42-27 loss to Oregon, and being 8-3, I wouldn't kill the program. Washington 9-2 after a 45-20 win over Maryland. It's kind of surprising. I heard the other day that Maryland is considering keeping Mike Locksley. Boy, I don't know about that. But thank goodness Maryland is there, because we won't be we'll be one of the worst teams in the Big Ten, but we won't be the worst. With Maryland and Purdue in the picture. Nonetheless, it's off to Vegas and number 20, Tennessee, and Notre Dame. Let's see if you can get a split out of that. Probably won't happen, but if you get a win against Notre Dame on paper at least, that would look good and reverse some of the ill will and the rants, well-deserved, when we lost to Central Connecticut State. This week, upcoming is Thanksgiving. Everybody enjoy a very safe, happy, bountiful, and thankful Thanksgiving week. We'll talk to you soon. We'll be talking about Tennessee, Notre Dame, and any other Penn State, Rutgers comings and goings Everybody enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you the next time.